Are you tired of winning and constantly playing the same cards? This isn't even, you know, let's just get into this deck tech. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for dropping by and your ongoing support. My name is Patrick, host of the EDH Brutality YouTube channel, in which we upload Magic the Gathering content every Sunday. So if you like what you see, make sure to leave a like, comment, and even subscribe while you're at it. As always, the full deck list will be provided down in the description below, as well as timestamps throughout today's video. And boy, do we have a list for you. As a matter of fact, I believe we are the second person ever on YouTube to cover this unique EDH general. So without further ado, let's get into today's commander. Coming in at 3 colors, 2 white, and 1 green mana, Lord Magnus is a 4/3 human druid that reads, First Strike. Creatures with PLAINSWALK or FORESTWALK may be blocked as if they did not have either ability. And of course, what a useful ability at that.
You're joking about that, right?
I'm just joking. The ability, absolutely garbage. But before we jump into just how trash this card actually is and how fun we can make this deck, we must first discuss, is this a deck for you? First up, you will enjoy this deck immensely if you are in search of a low-powered brew in which is difficult to pilot yet heavily rewarding when done correctly. You want to play a unique commander. I mean, let's face it, Lord Magnus? This is the 17th deck on the entire internet. And there's a reason for that, and that's simply because, well, people are smarter than... Why are we even building this commander? I mean, come on.
He's a 6 mana 4/3 with a useless ability. Oh, why do I do this to myself?
Nonetheless, though, challenge accepted. And last but not least, if you are a sucker for old cards, you will enjoy this deck. As a matter of fact, we don't even have a single retro framed or styled card in this brew. So it's truly an old school deck. Of course, you could always use this deck tech video as a guideline and make your own tweaks, but why add new cards to it? Come on, it's our only excuse of losing the game here with a commander this bad. And with that out of the way, let's discuss why you may dislike this deck, starting with the obvious. It is not very strong. As a matter of fact, that PLAINSWALK, or the anti-PLAINSWALK our commander gives, well, turns out there's only 4 creatures in the entire database of Magic the Gathering that have the ability PLAINSWALK. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say no one in the right mind, other than me, will ever be playing these creatures. And I'm not right in the head to begin with, so... why?
Why?
And lastly, you will dislike this deck immensely if you are not typically one for big, stompy creatures as well as token generation, because it turns out mono green is great for both of those, so you better bet we're going to be using both in full effect. So if that's not your playstyle, then I'm sorry, but this is not the deck for you. With that out of the way, we can finally jump right into the overall premise of today's deck tech. And that's executing what green performs best in, out-ramping all of our opponents so we can spit out all those overcasted old school creatures to flood the board and eventually even give them both PLAINSWALK or FORESTWALK to make our massive army unblockable. Or in other words, we want to beat face. Now, it should be noted, our commander Lord Magnus once again does read, creatures with PLAINSWALK or FORESTWALK may be blocked as if they did not have either ability. So hold your horses before you're saying, well, why are we having an entire deck built around Forest and PLAINSWALK if our commander just counters that ability? Well, let me just tell you that we can abuse our commander and make this a one-sided effect very easily with one simple card. So let's talk about Astral Slide. For 2 colors and 1 white mana, this enchantment spell reads, whenever a player cycles a card, you may remove target creature from the game. If you do, return that creature to play under its owner's control at end of turn. So if done correctly, we can target our own commander, Lord Magnus, and temporarily exile him when it comes time for us to go to our combat step. In other words, making it where all of our creatures that did have FORESTWALK and PLAINSWALK unblockable.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT!
And then after combat, at the end of our turn, when we go to pass, our Lord Magnus will come back on board and everything can be blocked as normal, making his ability truly a one-sided effect in a 4-player pod of EDH. But even so, how can this one-sided ability affect our opponents if they don't have any creatures with these plains or forest walk abilities? Well, let's sweeten the deal starting with a Lumbering Sats here. There's 2 colors and 2 green mana, 5/4 beast creature reads. All creatures gain Forest Walk. We also have enchantments like Ice and Highway for 3 colors and 3 white mana. This enchantment spell reads, all white creatures gain Plainswalk, as well as Hidden Path. For 2 colors and 4 green mana, this enchantment spell reads, all green creatures gain Forest Walk. So there are plenty of ways in this deck in which we can grant our opponent's creatures the walk abilities that will allow them to be unblockable depending on each land on the battlefield. Not only is this a great asset to increase the speed of the game since everything is unblockable, but it can also be a political weapon, temporarily exiling our commander thanks to the Astral Slide, granting certain players unblockable thanks to the Forest Walk as long as we cycle a card and exile our commander during their combat step. Of course, none of this would be possible after all if we didn't have cards to cycle, so that out of the way, let's get into our cycling package. And for those that aren't aware what cycling is, within the game of Magic the Gathering, it is a printed mechanic on certain cards that allows the user to pay a certain amount of mana to discard that card to the graveyard and draw a card in place of it. Of course, all done at instant speed. So if we're going to be cycling a lot in this deck, we have to include Fluctuator. For 2 colorless mana, this artifact spell reads, cycling costs you up to 2 less colorless mana to play. And with most cycles only costing 2 colorless mana, this will make that instant speed discard effect to draw a card free. And it really doesn't get much better than that, because if we're discarding a card to draw a card for free, well, turns out we do have 10 cycling cards within this deck, so we can do it rather consistently, as well as exile that commander to make our Forest and Plainswalk a one-sided ability. We also have a very neat synergy here. If we use any one of our 3 runes of protections, we both have Rune of Protection Red, green, as well as black in the deck, and if we pay the 2 mana to cycle these, or let's say it's even free thanks to the Fluctuator, and we have the Astral Slide trigger on the stack to target a specific creature to exile until end of turn, well, let's target none other than Monk Idealist or even Auramancer. And both of these creatures are identical, both being 2 colors and 1 white mana with the identical ETB of whenever they come into play, return target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. So what does this all equate to? It means that we can cycle any one of our runes of protections for free or even 2 mana. When we cycle, we'll discard it to the graveyard and we'll draw the top card of our deck. Well, the Astral Stride trigger will go on stack, we'll exile either the Auramancer or the Monk Idealist until end of turn, and then when it comes back into play the following turn, the ETB will go on the stack and we'll return that rune we just cycled back to our hand, able to do it all over again, equating to free and repeatable card draw even when it is not our turn.
I don't understand the words you just said.
It's complicated, but it is some really neat stuff. So now that we have methods to give all creatures on board Forest or Plainswalk, as well as repeatable ways to temporarily exile our commander during our combats, well, how do we make it where people have the correct lands so our Forest or Plainswalk can hit properly? Well, unfortunately, being a true old school deck, we can't just throw in Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, because that wouldn't be theoretically legal given the restrictions of this brew. So I've got 3 cards in mind specifically, starting off with Graceful Antelope. For 2 colors and 2 white mana, this 1/4 antelope creature reads, Plainswalk. Whenever Graceful Antelope deals combat damage to a player, you may have target land become a plains until Graceful Antelope leaves play. And what's fantastic about this is it does not need to be the player the antelope hits. He makes contact with anyone on board, and what do you know? Any land that you desire will become a plains. And of course, naturally, this will allow every creature on board with Plainswalk to become unblockable when they are swinging at that specific player. That is, of course, unless you have your commander out, but we already have ways, as mentioned prior, to temporarily get rid of him so we can reap the benefits of the Planeswalk. Up next, we've got Gia's Liege for 3 colors and 3 green mana. This avatar creature reads, Gia's Liege's power and toughness are each equal to the number of forests you control. As long as Gia's Liege is attacking, its power and toughness are each equal to the number of forests defending player controls instead. Tap Gia's Liege and target land becomes a forest until Gia's Liege leaves play. So it's slightly better than the Graceful Antelope, as we don't even need to make contact to create a forest under a target opponent's control. Once again, making every creature on board with FORESTWALK unblockable to that specific player controlling a forest. And last but not least, for further redundancy, we do have a Mystic Compass in our brew for 2 colorless mana. This artifact spell reads, pay 1 colorless mana and tap Mystic Compass for target mana producing land to become a basic land type of your choice until end of turn. Now, as we continue this brew, I did come to 2 conclusions while building this old school commander deck. And that's whenever you're working with obscure cards, you need 2 things that will make you successful in doing so. The first of which being card draw, and the second of which being the ramp to play the expensive card draw. Because let's be honest, card draw in old school Magic, it wasn't good.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
That's right, so this portion of the video we're designated to none other than ramp. Starting off with Deep Reconnaissance for 2 colors and 1 green mana. This sorcery speed spell reads, search your library for a basic land card and put that card into play tapped. Then shuffle your library with a flashback cost of 4 colors and 1 green mana. For a similar effect, we do have Far Wanderings for 2 colors and 1 green mana, another sorcery speed spell that reads, search your library for a basic land card and put that card into play tapped, then shuffle your library with a threshold. Instead, search your library for 3 basic land cards and put them into play tapped, then shuffle your library. You have threshold if 7 or more cards are in your graveyard. Next up, we've got Rampant Growth, a 1 colors and 1 green sorcery speed spell that reads, search library for a basic land card and put that into play tapped. Shuffle your library after, as well as similar effects with Explosive Vegetation for 3 colors and 1 green mana that states, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. And being in the color green, let's face it would be embarrassing if this was our only form of ramp. So let's also pair up with an Untamed Wilds for 2 colors and 1 green mana. This sorcery speed spell reads, search your library for any 1 basic land and put it into play untapped. This does not count towards your 1 land per turn limit. Reshuffle your library afterwards. As well as a Croson Verge, a land that acts similar to Myriad Landscape. We can pay 2 colorless mana and tap and sacrifice our Croson Verge to search our library for a forest as well as a plains card and put them directly into play tapped, shuffling afterwards. But with even all this ramp, it is nothing in comparison to the next 3 cards within the segment. Starting with Oath of Lieges for 1 colors and 1 white mana. This enchantment spell reads, during each player's upkeep, if that player controls fewer lands than target opponent, that player may search his or her library for a basic land card and put that land into play untapped. That player shuffles his or her library afterwards, as well as the mana accelerant known as Mirari's Wake for 3 colors and 1 green and 1 white mana. This enchantment spell reads, creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produced. Both cards being essential, especially when it comes to the higher costed mana within this deck. And for a flashier ramp synergy, we do have Oath of Druids in the deck for 1 colors and 1 green mana. This enchantment spell reads, during each player's upkeep, if that player controls fewer creatures than target opponent, the player may reveal cards from his or her library until he or she reveals a creature card. The player puts that creature card into play and all other revealed cards into his or her graveyard. Not only will that help us spit out those large CMC creatures within this deck, but it'll also pile up our graveyard with lots of basics. And how can we ramp from this? Well, none other than Planar Birth for 1 colors and 1 white mana. This synergistic sorcery speed spell reads, put all basic land cards from all graveyards into play under their owner's control tapped. But all this mana at our disposal means nothing if we don't have cards we can play. So that's right, we're covering card draw. Starting with a Messy Tome for 4 colors mana. This artifact spell reads, pay 5 colors mana and tap to draw 2 cards and then choose and discard a card. We've got Well of Discovery for 6 colors mana. This artifact spell reads, at the end of your turn, if you control no untapped lands, draw a card. We've got Urza's Blueprints for 6 colors mana, an artifact spell that reads, Echo. During your next upkeep after this permanent comes under your control, pay its casting cost or sacrifice it with a tap ability of draw a card. Next up is Histrodon for 4 colors and 1 green mana. This trampling 3/4 beast reads, Trample. When Histrodon deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. This brew is also equipped with an Enchantress's Presence for 2 colors and 1 green mana enchantment spell. It reads, whenever you play an enchantment spell, draw a card, as well as a Howling Mine for 2 colors mana, an artifact spell. That reads, at the beginning of each player's draw step, if Howling Mine is untapped, that player draws an additional card. If that's not enough for you, however, we do have several heavy hitters when it comes to our card draw within this deck, starting with Pursuit of Knowledge, a 3 colors and 1 white mana enchantment spell that reads, skip drawing a card to put a study counter on Pursuit of Knowledge. Remove 3 study counters from Pursuit of Knowledge to sacrifice Pursuit of Knowledge and draw 7 cards. We also do have Compost within the deck, a 1 colors and 1 green enchantment spell with eroded text that reads, whenever a black card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, you may draw a card. When it comes to card draw upkeep synergies, we do have Primitive Etchings for 2 colors and 2 green mana. This enchantment spell reads, reveal the first card you draw each turn. Whenever you reveal a creature card this way, draw a card, as well as Rowan, a 2 colors and 2 green mana enchantment spell that reads, during your draw phase, reveal the first card you draw to all players. If that card is a basic land, draw a card. For token card draw, we do have Collective Unconscious for 4 colors and 2 green mana, a sorcery speed spell that reads, draw a card for each creature you control, as well as my personal favorite, Slate of Ancestry for 4 colors mana. This artifact spell reads, pay 4 colors mana and tap Slate of Ancestry to discard your hand and draw a card for each creature you control. And lastly, if we just want a really unique ramping card draw synergy, we do have Grafted Skullcap in the deck for 4 colors mana. Once again, another artifact spell that reads, during your draw phase, draw an additional card. At the end of each of your turns, discard your hand. And if we're discarding our hand anyways, I can't think of a better card to include in this deck other than Mana Bond. At 1 green mana, this is an enchantment spell that reads, during your discard phase, you may choose to put all land cards from your hand into play. If you do, discard the rest of your hand.
Hey, that's pretty good.
So as you can see, we've got plenty of ways to draw cards, and we have even more ways to ramp, allowing us to draw these cards. Now, before we deck ourselves with this amount of card draw, we must discuss in how we're going to win the game. The first method, once again, is giving all creatures on board either Plains or FORESTWALK, why not both, and then swinging out, beating our opponents to death. And the 3 creatures within our deck most likely to get the job done is first being a Sentinel Druid at 1 colors and 1 green mana that reads, Sentinel Druid gains a 1/1 counter each time an opponent casts an artifact. Ancient Ooze for 5 colors and 2 green mana that reads, Ancient Ooze's power and toughness are each equal to the total converted mana cost of other creatures you control, as well as the previously mentioned Gia's Leash, all while shielding ourselves in the process, as long as we are able to flicker our commander on and off the board repeatedly. And the second method today is once again combat through Forest and Planeswalk, but this time with the use of tokens incorporated. Now, tokens are very easy to generate, as we've got cards such as Symbiotic Beast at 4 colors and 2 green mana. This 4/4 beast reads, when Symbiotic Beast is put into a graveyard from play, put 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens into play, as well as Mongrel Pack, a 3 colors and 1 green mana for 1 hound creature that reads, if Mongrel Pack is put into any graveyard from play during combat, put 4 hound tokens into play. Treat those tokens as 1/1 green creatures. Other creatures with similar effects come with Saber Ants, a 3 colors and 1 green 2/3 insect creature that reads, when Saber Ants is dealt damage, you may put that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens into play, as well as Symbiotic Worm for 5 colorless and 3 green mana. This 7/7 worm creature reads, when Symbiotic Worm is put into a graveyard from play, put 7 1/1 green insect creature tokens into play. And last but not least, for token creation while we are interacting with our opponent's board states, we do have Aura Mutation for 1 green and 1 white mana. This instant speed spell reads, destroy target enchantment, put X 1/1 green sapperling creature tokens into play, where X is its converted mana cost, as well as a Night Soil coming in at 2 green mana. This enchantment spell hoses graveyard themed decks specs as it states. Pay 1 colorless mana instant speed to remove 2 creatures in any graveyard from the game to put a Sapperling token into play. Treat this token as a 1/1 green creature. And what do we do once the board is flooded with our beefy as well as small creature tokens? Well, we're going to cast none other than Decree of Savagery for 7 colors in 2 green mana. This is an instant speed spell that reads, put 4 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. And there you have it, folks. A surefire yet simplistic way to win using one of Magic's most obscure generals. But that's gonna do it for today's deck tech. I'm super proud of this one, and as a matter of fact, I did just purchase this entire list over on TCGPlayer, and I am now awaiting for it to arrive in the mail. If you enjoyed this deck tech but want to make it better, obviously swap out any cards you want. I myself am just a sucker for the old cards, so this is what I came up with, and I hope you guys can apply it to your own brewing. And if you're interested in seeing the complete deck list, make sure to take a look down in the description below, as I did leave several cards out. And as a matter of fact, they are all tagged whenever I do create a deck on Moxfield. So if you want to see my thought process between certain includes, just select tags, and you can see each card and how they're categorized. So yeah, that's gonna do it for today's video. As a matter of fact, that's gonna do it for 2023. I hope everyone has a wonderful New Year's ahead of them, and let's see what we can make happen in 2024. So that being said, if you'd like to stay tuned for future videos in the channel, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And as always, my name is Patrick, host of EDH Brutality. I thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in 2024. Peace out, guys.